What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live in living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Smarter? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, please jump on over to DJLittleRock.com. Come on by. The water's fine. I don't know. If it's a pool party, maybe the water's fine. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you can have me at your next event. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous? Use the hashtag What Makes You Famous and find it everywhere. What makes you smarter? Well, let's find out. Let's do it together right here on the program. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, 10 things you need to know today for Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. 10 things you need to know today. Number 1, Trump uses coronavirus briefing to attack critics. President Trump used Monday's White House coronavirus briefing to push back against criticism on his administration's handling of the crisis. Before experts were given time to update the public on the crisis, Trump presented a campaign-style video to portray his response as timely and lashed out at critics and press coverage, particularly over the administration's failure to act aggressively to prevent the outbreak from spreading in February. Quote, "We really have done this right. The problem is the press doesn't cover it the way it should be," end quote. Trump said. The U.S. death toll from coronavirus rose from more than 22,000 with more than 580,000 confirmed cases. The number of cases worldwide has reached roughly 2 million. This is according to CNN and The Hill. Number 2, Sanders endorses Biden. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent Vermont, on Monday endorsed his former rival for the Democratic presidential nomination, Joe Biden. Quote, "We need you in the White House," end quote, Sanders told the former vice president. Quote, "And I will do all that I can to see that that happens," end quote. Biden responded by telling Sanders, quote, "I'm going to need you, not just to win the campaign, but to govern," end quote. Sanders' formal support was seen as a strong signal to Sanders' intensely loyal followers and a potentially important factor as Biden tries to win over young progressives. An expected endorsement from another of the primary's field's top progressives, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat, Massachusetts, could reinforce Biden's pitch to progressives. This is according to the New York Times. Number 3, governors unite to plan for reopening regional economies. 2 groups of governors, one from the East Coast and the other from the West, announced Monday that they were joining forces to develop coordinated plans to eventually reopen their economies. The governors plan to roll back coronavirus restrictions slowly to avoid new spikes of infections. New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Rhode Island are forming the Eastern Regional Council, while California, Washington, and Oregon are forming the Western one. The announcement came as the White House unveiled its new council to stimulate the federal economy and reopen businesses. President Trump, who has said he has hopes to reopen parts of the economy as soon as possible, said he had the, quote, total, end quote, authority to overrule the governors. Quote, "The President of the United States calls the shots," end quote, he said. This is according to Axios and the New York Times. Number 4, Navy confirms sailor from USS Theodore Roosevelt died of coronavirus. A sailor from the USS Theodore Roosevelt, whose captain was ousted after warning of a coronavirus outbreak, has died from COVID-19 complications, the Navy confirmed on Monday. The sailor, whose name wasn't released, tested positive for the coronavirus on March 30th and was admitted into intensive care on April 9th. This is the first confirmed death of one of the ship's sailors from COVID-19. More than 500 sailors from the USS Theodore Roosevelt have tested positive for the coronavirus, and 4 more sailors were reportedly admitted to the hospital over the weekend. Earlier this month, Captain Brett Crozier was relieved of duty after writing a letter sounding the alarm about a coronavirus outbreak on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, writing, quote, "Sailors do not need to die," end quote, and calling for action, quote, "now," end quote. This is according to CNN. Number 5, Supreme Court to hear arguments via telephone. From May 4th to May 13th, the Supreme Court will hear arguments for 10 cases over the phone for the first time in its history. While some state and federal courts have heard cases remotely for a while, this is the first time the Supreme Court will hear arguments without physically being together. The court's next session will include a case on faithless electors in the Electoral College and a case combining House Democrats and New York State prosecutors' subpoenas for President Trump's financial records. The Supreme Court has already delivered decisions remotely since the COVID-19 pandemic began, though that wasn't a new practice for the court. The decision to let Wisconsin's primary continue during the pandemic was delivered remotely, but the court has postponed future arguments until deciding to proceed on Monday. This is according to Bloomberg. Number 6, liberal beats Trump-backed incumbent for Wisconsin Supreme Court seat. Democrats won a significant victory in Wisconsin's election for a state Supreme Court seat on Monday, when the liberal challenger was declared the upset winner of last week's election over a conservative incumbent, backed by President Trump. The liberal candidate, Jill Karofsky, beat Justice Daniel Kelly by more than 90,000 votes as of Monday night, a margin of victory that surprised members of both parties in a potentially crucial presidential battleground state. Also, former Vice President Joe Biden was declared the winner of last week's controversial Wisconsin presidential primary, which was held despite a last-minute effort by the state's governor to delay in-person voting due to the coronavirus outbreak. Biden, the presumptive Democratic nominee, handily won against Senator Bernie Sanders, independent Vermont, who has since suspended his campaign and endorsed Biden. This is according to the New York Times. Number 7, Trump administration asks Congress to extend census deadlines. The Trump administration on Monday urged Congress to push back data collection deadlines for the 2020 census as the country enters its second month of coronavirus shutdowns. The Census Bureau earlier delayed the deadlines by weeks and suspended field operations, but now the Trump administration wants Congress to allow several more months for census forms to be collected and tallied. The new plan calls for reopening field offices in June and allowing data collection to continue to October 31st, rather than stopping in mid-August as currently planned. The deadline for delivering redistricting data to states would be pushed back by 4 months to July 31st, 2021. This is according to the Washington Post. Number 8, death toll from violent storms reaches 30 in South. The death toll from violent storms and tornadoes that crashed through the South rose to at least 30 people on Monday. It was the deadliest flurry of tornadoes in the United States in 6 years. More than 1 million homes and businesses lost power as dozens of tornadoes were reported. 11 people were killed in Mississippi, 9 in South Carolina, and 8 in Georgia. Falling trees and other wind damage also killed people in Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Forecasters said the region would get calmer weather on Tuesday, with a slight chance of continuing severe weather in pockets of southern Georgia and Florida, but only a low threat of more tornadoes. This is according to USA Today. Number 9, immigration detainees say protective gear scarce in detention centers. Detained asylum seekers are calling for guards to give them masks to help prevent the spread of coronavirus, the Associated Press reported Monday. 3 detainees told the AP that guards in the Otay Mesa detention center, run by a private prison company in San Diego, refused to hand over masks until detainees signed a form saying they could not hold the company liable if they were infected with the COVID-19 coronavirus. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has started to reduce the number of people in detention in an effort to prevent the spread of the virus. The number of coronavirus cases at Otay Mesa Detention Center jumped from 1 case to 12 last week. 72 detainees in 12 states have now tested positive. This is according to the Associated Press. Number 10, ESPN asks highest paid talent to take pay cut. ESPN on Monday asked about 100 of its highest paid commentators, writers, and analysts to accept a voluntary pay cut to help save the jobs of colleagues as college and professional sports remain on hiatus due to the coronavirus crisis. The cuts would last 3 months and amount to 3.75% of the affected employees' annual salaries. Quote, today I am asking you something that I never imagined I would, end quote, ESPN president Jimmy Pitaro said to the selected employees in a Monday email that was obtained by the Washington Post. ESPN executives already have taken a pay cut of 20% to 30%, depending on their seniority level. ESPN's parent company, Disney, recently announced it would furlough thousands of workers due to the crisis. This is according to the Washington Post. That's 10 things you need to know today for Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. Whew, looking pretty grim out there, but there's light on the horizon. I expect good news soon, hopefully. This has been What Makes You Smarter. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. That's it for me. It's Keys Dan, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. If you like what you hear, I encourage you to follow What Makes You Smarter on social media. Find it on Facebook at What Makes You Smarter, Instagram at What Makes You Smarter, Twitter at SmarterWhat, and YouTube. Username Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Smarter podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Smarter podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. My personal favorite, learn with me on my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time for What Makes You Famous. Support What Makes You Smarter podcast using the PayPal, paypal.me/KeysDan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Smarter is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening.